Oh, this one. I said I was going to watch this one before. I don't want to forget. A brief review of Deadlock so far. For those who don't know, / didn't remember, I had a little bit of a Deadlock arc. I still think this game will be huge when it actually comes out. Personally, I put a game down because I couldn't keep up with the constant like massive swings and updates. Like within every 2 weeks, like the whole game changed, or all the items or the builds or even the fucking map or characters. It was just so much for a game that was still like closed access, and only on PC. As a streamer, as a creator, as a gamer, I just couldn't balance being in high MMR lobbies. It was before ranked even came out. Higher MMR lobbies, because then I'd take like 3, 4, 5 days off and come back and get smoked for 2 hours or 3 hours, and it was awful. You know what I mean? Like no one likes getting fucking destroyed in lobbies for like 4 hours straight. It's ass. And so unfortunately, I was just like, I'll come back to this game at another time. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. So I watched a video not too long ago about Deadlock. So I just want to watch another one, see what it's like. Brief review of Deadlock so far. What's been going on? Also, Jonas sent me a clip of him in Deadlock the other day and was like, I miss us playing Deadlock. And I was like, soon, someday.
I find it quite difficult to talk about an unfinished game with
This is my gameplay loop right here.
Gravitas, like criticizing the taste of a pie when it's still wet pastry. Everything you see on screen is all subject to change, and thus any criticisms or doubts can be countered by reminding yourself that this is all still early access, and what you're playing does not paint the full picture of the developer's intentions. Not yet, anyway.
True.
Regardless, while Valve's next game continues to hold a firm grasp on the minds of gamers worldwide, if nothing else for being Valve's next game, I thought I'd weigh in, as somewhat of a Valve enthusiast myself, on the upcoming MOBA hero shooter thingy, Deadlock. So far.
I don't think it's happened, but as much. But I hope this game long term doesn't have like the CS people hoping on its downfall because they're getting more work than CS2. In the same way that it already seems to be that the Destiny players are mad that Marathon exists. Just throwing it out there.
Well, I may be slightly late to the hype train. I was hesitant to talk about the game until I had clocked in at least 100 hours and felt I had firm footing in understanding what Deadlock's trying.
Also, since I last played, that was not in the game yet. That was like you could play it early, like not like in the files, like you could unlock it in the training range. Hadn't played that. That wasn't there. That wasn't there. That wasn't there. That wasn't there. This wasn't there. This wasn't there. This wasn't there. Yeah, it's been a bit.
In at least 100 hours and felt I had firm footing in understanding what Deadlock's trying to do. And for me that took slightly longer than most. As I say, the game is a MOBA, and I'd never actually played any other MOBAs except for a brief 2-week stint in League of Legends, which in hindsight acted as
learning a MOBA from the beginning with a lot of people who played MOBAs, tough.
More of an inoculation against the genre, so upon hearing that Deadlock, a new IP from Valve for crying out loud, was going to be a MOBA, a fearful possibility set in. The possibility that I might not like the next Valve game. I mean, we only get these quinquennially, so if something produced by arguably the highest quality and most morally sound game producers on the modern market isn't my cup of tea, then I'll have to be content with everything else. Another win for indies, I suppose. Deadlock is a 6v6 MOBA shooter thingy seemingly set in the dark, twisted Monsters Inc. universe in which you push up various lanes against your opponent team.
Wait, they changed the game. There's 3 lanes now. There's not 4. 1, 2, 3 lanes. See, like, this is what I meant though, but like, there's just so much that's changing. It's so fast. So I'm guessing the reason they did this is they're going to put 2 people in each lane now. So no more solo lanes. Yeah, solo lanes kind of suck sometimes because if you got unlucky on your matchup, with like a good player, or deviousness. There was matchmaking for each lane, technically, right? At least when I played in the beginning. And so if you had 2 people on a team lane swap with each other, like let's say like I was the noob, right? And they'd put me against a noob. And then 2 people are duo and they're like, yo, I want to be in the lane with my duo, right? And the noob wants to join the lane with their duo. So they swap lanes with the other guy that's in the double lane. And that guy is just a gamer and he comes in my lane. I get absolutely shit on. It was awful.
Currency in this case.
But with a duo, it's easier.
Upgrades and defeat the defending NPC mini bosses along the enemy lane until finally reaching the enemy.
The last big update was in February. They don't do bi-weekly ones anymore. Okay, that's true. I did hear about that as well. They slowed down the updates and they're like doing big updates now. It's changed since the Funk study video. Yeah. I know. I've kept up with it. Not like super kept up with it, but enough to be like hey, what's going on with you guys over there? Granted, though, it's just not anything for me to come back to yet. I'll probably wait till either a full release or a beta. That being said, though, I just also have so much going on. Like, I've been liking Overwatch, what it's been doing. I've been loving Rivals. I've been doing Variety. Think life has been great. I've actually never had a better mental than I currently do, being able to just do whatever the fuck I want. Someday, Deadlock will return. I just don't know when that day will come. But like, it's good to see that they've done all these changes already.
Destroy the other team's
just in the first 2 minutes.
Game. There are also side objectives like camps of NPC aliens of varying squishiness that reward you with souls for clearing them, a host of temporary and permanent minor boons around the map, an enormous boss in the middle of the map, creatively named Mid-Boss, that buffs your troops and respawn time should you kill it, and an urn of souls that can be carried across the map strand style for a bountiful team-wide currency reward. Like all MOBAs, it all may seem rather daunting at first, especially if you've never really experienced a MOBA before like I hadn't, so it was tough to say whether I would in fact like the next Valve game without passing the X hours playtime barrier of entry required to understand what the bloody hell is going on even. The learning phase.
The learning phase is tough.
I do like the next Valve game. Mostly. Again, the game calls itself very early access, so trying to critique any...
The urn will run away now if it's dropped. That's fucking amazing.
Outside of the core gameplay, when it all shifts every few weeks with each major patch, and even a little in between with sporadic minor patches, makes critique feel somewhat pointless, but the foundation of Deadlock is rather rock solid. I got it. The gunplay is satisfying, the physics-based movement of players and objects is tightly woven into gameplay, and has a high skill ceiling, what with its dash jumps, wall kicks, and preservations of momentums and such, and the slow creeping power you gain from making the right choices and buying the right items at the right moments against the right opponents feels very, very nice. What doesn't feel very, very nice are things like the UI being overly cluttered with a daunting amount of information for new players, the plethora of stun and slowing mechanics that lead to fights feeling unfair, with much of these stun mechanics being undeserving point and clicks, a strangely hostile matchmaking system that creates brutal stomps that must be played out for a full 40 minutes or more at times, even if it was clear you were going to lose in the first 10, a vicious respawn timer that slowly increases up to around 70 seconds during the latter third of the game, being unable to see at a glance the tools your enemies have at their disposal as you're fighting them, with large unreactable instances of burst damage, melee and parry registration being completely scuffed. I suppose some things are destined to never change. The current matchmaking system seeming to be especially hostile if grouped up with friends. Oh dear, I seem to have listed more downsides than upsides.
Good gun gameplay and game feel, high depth of movement, rewarding power scaling. Downside, overbearing UI, obnoxious stun mechanics, hostile matchmaking, every match is a stomp. Games take way too long. Honey, time for your first system mandated loss streak, minute-long respawns, unreadable matchups, melee hit reg, punishing for players with friends, Mo and Krill.
That's just the thing, dear viewer.
That Mo and Krill one is actually so fucking real.
I still haven't entirely made up my mind. Deadlock manages to go between feeling very fun and well thought out on close, balanced games where item progression is even across all players, and your teammates decide to actually communicate their intent, to the most soul-crushing experience you can have online in games where there's even a slight shift in skill between teams, which, due to the nature of progression in MOBAs of the rich getting richer, can lead to a somewhat saddening snowball of suffering. Most of this is probably an artifact of being in early access, but even still, having a good time feels so fragile, and trying to come back from a...
One small thing that I really like, this might have changed now, but something that I didn't like about Deadlock is there was a certain point in the game where it no longer mattered about pushing objectives. It no longer mattered about doing stuff, right? Once you hit a certain point in the game where the respawns were 70 seconds, you would all play together and not move. You wouldn't push too deep. You wouldn't get back. You'd wait for a pick, or you try to bait a boss or mid-boss. And the idea was, if you lost the fight, the big fight, as in your death ball, you lost the game. And so it didn't matter if you were way ahead or way behind. At some point, if the queues just became too long, you just, like, you didn't do anything. You wouldn't poke. You wouldn't play too aggressive. Like, you'd only let your long range, like, characters kind of poke. Everyone else just sat there, like, don't take too much damage. Don't take too much chip, because they could run in on you on it. And so you'd all sit there and, like, not move. And it was really ass.
A loss feels impossible at times. As I said, it's easy to tell which team will inevitably win 10 minutes in, if not before, based on who has more souls. Bigger ratio equals win. The problem is, you acknowledge this at the 10-minute mark, and Deadlock has no round timer. You could be fighting a lost game for another 30 or 40 minutes before seeing the defeat screen, and that's hardly good for the old morale. Why boot up another game when it could be another 3/4 of an hour stomp? Part of me doesn't want them to add a surrender mechanic, especially not so early in development, but another part of me doesn't want to keep dying to the enemy wraith's one-shot ult combo for another 20 plus minutes just because she was fed twice my souls by our fresh install Abrams. Yeah, and speaking of fresh installs, I found this game to be somewhat
weird outside perspective. What if a surrender mechanic was something that was only able to be done automated, right? So like, let's say they're ahead by 20,000 souls. You would then be asked by the game, or the game would unlock the option to surrender, right? That way in the early game, no one's surrendering just because they lose their lane a couple times. Like, I'm not saying 20,000 souls. Like, you could change the number on whatever number they feel like is the correct item, like number, where it's like, okay, they're so far ahead, we're fucked. There's no point. Then it could be unlocked as an option, not something like you have. Like, the game will not be like, would you like to surrender? Because like people will choose yes. It would just in the menu unlock as an option. And so if you knew as a player, oh, they're 20,000 ahead, boom, then people would start throwing. The argument sounds like it makes sense until you take into account then if they're already getting shit stomped, people will throw anyways. So if we're going to argue that like adding a mechanic like that will cause people to throw, people will throw if they're really hard ahead just to get the game over with. If they're already that far ahead, people will just AFK and throw and be like, game's over, GG. As opposed to, in the same breath, you're saying they'll throw on purpose to unlock that option. They would just get out of the game sooner, right? I know what you're saying. And normally I'm actually against surrender mechanics, but Deadlock's a really long game. That's all.
Somewhat of a hard sell to my friends. If they're new or have even slightly less experience than me, I'll feel less like a guy playing video games with his friends and more like a drill sergeant stringing along freshers through a boot camp. And indeed, we've been experiencing this phenomenon for years with the popularization of hero shooters in the 6v6 format. One player on your team installed the game yesterday, whilst the enemy Genji has 6,000 hours of competitive practice. It's therefore difficult for me to have confidence in what Deadlock's trying to do. Quite frankly, we've played these games before, and I'm not sure another
I love this video. Can I just say I love this video? This video has been great. There's so many little things in it. It's just like, I fucking relate.
Competitive 6v6 shooter.
Everywhere. We've played these games before. The Overwatch reference, all the Deadlock stuff up until this point, playing with friends, feeling like a drill sergeant. I relate to all of it.
Despite its variations in mechanics, is what the current market is after. I personally think much of the fun of online gaming comes from the controlled chaos of larger team sizes, which makes games feel more relaxed and casual. But online gaming seems to have an aversion to casual at the moment. All the emphasis is on winning and competitive rank and individual player impact, which
I agree. When did this video come out? 3 weeks ago? I would argue there's been a bit of a change in the perspective of that with Rivals release, because everyone says Rivals is like a casual game and casual is better. It's more fun. Players want to play a casual game. And now here we are in April, about to be in May, and I see more people complain about Rivals balance than I've ever seen before. And people say like, oh my God, the game's not balanced. It's not balanced. We need better balance. Oh my God, the competitive system isn't good. It rewards you just for playing a ton. It should be good because you actually climbed. And all of these casual arguments are falling apart at the seams. It's glorious to watch because I put no stake on either side. I am just nothing but a spectator. And so I agree, but you know what's funny? People yearn for to be a casual, but then once they play a couple hours and they get shit stomped a few games in a row, the ego kicks in. You're like, you know what? I'm better than that. I'm gonna beat them. And then you lock in and you sit forward and you're trying to win, but they're also trying to win. And thus you have created a competitive environment.
Which I'm not strictly opposed to. I do find enjoyment in high adrenaline situations dependent on the skill of the combatants. Coming out of an intense team fight victorious is what makes a gamer feel alive. But my days as a competitive Zenyatta main are probably behind me. My enjoyment in hyper-competitive online shooters has diminished with each new edition of the genre that attempts to somehow
Also, most of the videos today, all former Overwatch players. Kind of crazy.
Capture the magic. So I think I'll stick to my sedentary single-player era for the time being. I only seem to reserve competitive shooters to game nights with friends. The rise of the live service model has contributed to this, no doubt. Shooters today seem to place more of a focus on retaining players through cosmetics, taking mechanics from what worked before with little variation, and slapping on their own derivative brand, rather than retaining players through a unique foundation of gameplay that feels good and works. Very few seem to branch out. Deadlock may be another competitive shooter, but at least I'm not pushing another bloody payload card. It was only a few months before the game got its own ranked mode, despite being in very early access, and I couldn't help but look at this as a sign of things to come. I fear the game is destined to be another inaccessible, slur-filled sweatfest before it even launches, if it's not.
Yeah, that's actually the unfortunate truth. Small thing, as somebody who was like not super into the Deadlock community, but I was playing it a lot. That extremely toxic base was there when I was playing it, and like they were really weird. Not to me per se, because I wasn't that deep into it, but I had friends and other creators and other people that I knew that were in there, and like people, they were already getting their games thrown. People were making alt accounts for Deadlock Alpha to throw creator games or to like snipe certain players that were playing just to ruin their nights. It was absolutely happening. I had heard more slurs in Deadlock in like 2 weeks of playing it than I had heard in the last 3 months of Overwatch. And now playing Rivals. Rivals is definitely more toxic than Overwatch, not even close. But in the months I've played the 4 months I've played Rivals, I've heard less slurs in the 4 months of Rivals than I heard in my 2 weeks of Deadlock. So like, unfortunately, average MOBA experience.
Not already. Deadlock currently has no so-called progression system.
It might have that happen.
Or cosmetics, and when it does, I expect it will be largely based on win-loss, because multiplayer...
And again, that's all my perspective in my experience. It could be totally different for you. It could be totally wrong, right? Like, it'd be like, no, that was just like your one-time experience. It doesn't actually happen that much, and that's okay. But that doesn't make my experience not real. It happened, and I saw it happen, but if it doesn't happen for you, then that's great too.
Their games seem to have an allergy towards gaining progression of any kind when you lose, except for Splatoon, I suppose. I do hope I'm wrong. Even in the casual mode, this emphasis on winning and smaller teams...
Hey, Splatoon can be competitive. Hey, don't get it twisted. I learned about Splatoon.
...is making
That's a
winning
good game.
More dependent on your skill as an individual is what tips these games from intense but fun to downright stressful, and makes all my friends groan when I ask them to hop on, especially if they're still in that brutal learning phase. In an ideal world, your players should only be losing half the time, so maybe making half the game an overall unfun experience isn't the best idea from a consumer standpoint. Combine all this with games that can last 3/4 of an hour, and I find myself having to take breaks between each match because my heart rate is twice above resting and I haven't blinked since laning phase. Is this fun? The game asks after each match. I'm not always positive I know the answer. Still, I'm sure the game will do well enough. It is Valve, after all. I think with their track record of securing mostly bangers in the gameplay field and being the essential grandfather of modern hero shooters, we can trust them to get that part right. This is early access, after all. I just can't help but shake the feeling that Deadlock may become one of those games that's less fun to play than it is to talk about, and draw the biggest men kissing each other. Well, I suppose some things really do never change. I say this because, fortunately, the devs seem to be going for a unique set dressing, so let's talk a little bit about the game's art style.
Overwatch was like that for a while. It's not fun.
In this age of Fortnitification and the same pre-established characters being passed around from media to media, it's hard to understate how refreshing it is seeing original character designs with original personalities. And to have these new characters come from Valve, no less, is an extra special treat. The game is set in a sort of fantastical New York with a 1940s noir aesthetic, and the characters, those that are finished anyway, all conform to that style with unique flavors. Infernus is a demon
characters are really cool.
with the power to shoot flames from his fingertips. He has a silky smooth voice, a charming personality that you'd expect of a skilled bartender, and reinforces
and Lash is an asshole.
Creepy smiling fellows with a cool hat. Not all the heroes are bangers at the moment. Warden manages to be incredibly boring to play as, against, look at, and even listen to.
It's time to change the world.
Then there's Vindicta and Grey Talon, who are both equally out of place as each other and kind of reinforce the idea that, try as you might to make them interesting, snipers simply do not work in hero shooters, and please stop adding them, especially in a game like Deadlock where damage fall-off is so prevalent. Good luck laning against the Vindicta as one of the numerous characters who specialize in close-range shotgunning. But if the devs can somehow make the whole cast as interesting as characters like Seven, an escaped convict who fused with his electric chair during his execution and now commands lightning powers, then this game could be something very special indeed. His voice is also basically a combine, and it's really, really cool. I also like the little stylistic touches here and there, like Abrams taking less time to reload his gun the fewer shots you've fired, custom voice lines from the shopkeeper dropping bits of lore depending on your hero and the type of items you buy, and the custom melee animations given to characters like Viscus and Dynamo. I'm most excited to see how this style continues to evolve as the game gets developed. And that's the main thing, dear viewer. The most interesting part of Deadlock to me, more than the gunplay or the art style or the build theory crafting, is being here, boots on the ground as it gets developed. To experience a playtest of this scale conducted by a company notorious for staying silent about their projects until the week before launch is a truly novel experience. I enjoy seeing what feedback the devs take on board and how they choose to interpret it through balance changes, or seeing parts of the map get slowly more furnished and new characters.
I'm leaking it. I remember when I was getting into Deadlock, I had met some people that were like heavily into Deadlock and like heavily talking to devs, and like this is like when they were already talking about doing pro play and stuff like that. And there was players that would mean that they had homework, and it was because like part of like the deal, quote unquote, like unwritten contract, obviously, it was just like you help us, we help you. Is like every week they would write a report for the devs and be like, you know, what do they feel like was good, what do they feel like was bad, what felt strong, what felt too strong, what felt, you know, whatever. But I want to say what irked me a little bit, as I remember, all of like there was a group of them that were like talking about how like Abrams was OP, and I was like, dude, Abrams is strong, but I don't feel like he's OP. Like in certain ways, like I was like, yeah, like if you get into a punching match for sure, but I was like, you could just change the parry time, and you would probably like the parry cooldown. Like if you miss a parry, like you could probably actually make it a lot easier at that point to deal with. And they were like, nah, like, you know, you should be hitting shots. Like melee characters like that shouldn't be like so strong. Like they quote unquote look down on like melee build or like melee abilities. And then like the next week or 2 weeks later, after I remember hearing that conversation, he got nuked into the ground. Like nuked. He was just awful, like borderline unplayable for a little bit. And I was like, you know, if this is going to heavily lean into the type of game where it's like the only thing that people really care about is like hardcore aim, and kind of like they also have that direct connection, you know, to like influence that to happening. It's like, and how strong, how aggressive they were to like listening to that group of people. Not just like a little tune, like I remember like it was like they nerfed everything. They nerfed like the damage, they nerfed the pin, they nerfed the healing on it, they nerfed shotgun shoot time, reload speed, ult generation. Like it just got f***ing obliterated. I don't really want to be one of those people that's giving that feedback. I don't want to be one of those in the know people. I've done that before. I just want to be along for the ride. And I don't think you got a great group so far. So I'm just going to take a step back or two. And I just being like, nah, I'm good.
Joining the roster.
It was like one of my first things that left a really bad taste in my mouth.
Everything about the game is liable to change week to week as the devs figure out what exactly Deadlock is, like a toddler taking its first clumsy steps. And it's fascinating just being here for that experience. It's not unlikely that this is the most fun state, or at least the most experimental state that the game will ever be in before everyone gets too good at it and the game inevitably mellows out a bit. Much of the stun mechanics I complained about.
Well, I think pro players are smart in a lot of ways where they will break a game faster than anyone else. But when a game is so new and so fresh, like I'll give you a good example. Overwatch for years had no big swings. Like it was the same game with small tweaks. It is so easy, or it was at the time, so easy to predict what was going to happen, right? Like you look at whatever buffs and nerfs they did and go, yep, this is going to be the next meta. And boom, there it was within a week. In a game with so many abilities and so many buttons and so many changes, and still how new it was, like it is impossible to predict how fast a meta would develop without standard pro play. Because like if they didn't have standard pro play, like we've witnessed it in Overwatch 2, where when pro play is not happening, right? Like people will say, oh, this is meta, and then pro play starts up and it's completely different, and everyone goes, oh, okay, the meta is actually this, right? It will change the perspective wildly, very, very quickly. I feel like Deadlock hadn't had enough time in the people hadn't been playing it for long enough to be able to look at it change and be like, yep, this will become meta, or nope, that's too strong, that needs to be changed, to make those wild swing adjustments. So instead of like, oh, like we're going to change your damage from 17 to 16, right? Like just across the board nuking someone that quick. I was like,
About earlier have already been peeled back since I started writing. Haze's sleep knife now slows you instead of a complete stun. Grey Talon's trap was changed in a similar way.
That's a good
Mo and
change.
Krill are still in the game though, so we'll have to see how that goes. But my point is that the game is likely to look and feel completely different at launch to how it does now. So I would encourage anyone
it already looks
who's
way
remotely
different from when I
interested
played.
in Valve or modern game development to get an invite and glimpse a snapshot of the game's history, and then be one of the pretentious people on Twitter who can reminisce about the good old days. You know, before Mo and Krill were removed from the game. I'm not going to give Deadlock a score. I'll reserve that for when I inevitably re-review it at launch after slowly discovering that all my complaints were indeed issues of the skill variety. I'll probably hop on a match after uploading this video, in fact, but before I do, I'd like to lend my thanks to my highest tier patron, Mega, who has continued to support me despite the content drought of late, and to all my patrons at patreon.com/hintshot who got to see this video a day early. I encourage you all to try this game out for yourself. There is still much to discover
if you can get
and
in.
talk about while the world continues to digest Deadlock.
Probably not that hard to get in
the
now
next
these days.
Valve game. Cheerio.
Fantastic game. Really, really good. This is one of those games that I really hope does succeed because I'd love to play it more in the future. It already looks like it's changed a ton for the good, for the better, and it probably will continue to keep changing for the better.
I went fishing the other day and caught a flounder. I named him Flats, told him he has the awareness of a walnut and threw him back. Thumbs up emoji. Thank
you, Just a Lizard, parentheses, Just a Lizard for short, for the 5 super chat. Cool story, man. Much love, dude. Yeah, Deadlock is one of those games I genuinely want to succeed. I'd love to go back to playing it again. It really was a bit of a flash in the pan type game, unfortunately, for a lot of people, but I remember it had everyone in a chokehold. I remember fucking Shroud was playing the fuck out of this game, but his game launched, and so he wasn't playing his game, he was playing Deadlock, and everyone was like, you're not even playing your own game, you're playing Deadlock, and like, dude, how the hell could you be mad at the guy? Like, the game was fucking fun. Like, it was so fun, people were excited to play it, but if you notice, almost everybody stopped playing it around the same time. I think everyone just kind of hit a wall someday and was just like, ooh, maybe I'm good on this. And I think it's time we'll come back around. I think the day will come around where everyone will go, you know what? Hey, this game's actually fully out. Let's go play it. And I'll totally be one of those people that will go back and play the fuck out of it. And I can't wait for that day to come. That being said, though, I had my own personal issues with Deadlock in a lot of ways, like some of them being like, I just don't have time. Some of them being like, I don't really like how this certain thing is going. But it is nice to see that a lot of those looks like it's already changed. And I think the day when we get to go play it again will be a fun one. So look forward to it. Good video, though. Very good video.